once you connect your reporting tools like Tableau or things like that with Hadoop cluster, you can easily visualize the data on these tools, and that helps in helps you to look into the data, do analytics on the data, and things like that. That is not really an analytics, but that is a step towards analytics. And same way you can integrate, as I was talking, technologies like R or things like that to do other analytics on the data. And at the end of the session, I'll be giving you a project with some real-time data and giving you some real-time problems, which I'll ask you to do, and then we'll be discussing that in the class, so that you get a real feel about which technology to choose in which area or under which circumstances, and you also able to think how to stitch all these technologies together and how to use them in your real life also. Sounds good? Just click yes or no on the chat window will help me. Abhya says sure. Akash also says yes. Kamalji say so far so good. Okay, Rohit also says yes. Right, so I'll assume a yes from Girish also. Sure. So before going ahead, let me just talk about ourselves. So we are into e-learning, and we are teaching a lot of professionals across the world. We are one of the fastest growing company on online training. So I can't comment that we are the fastest, but we are one of them. Then we are teaching students across different things, cutting edge technologies, and we keep on adding courses to our training portfolio. Most of our trainers are working in this industry, and this helps us or helps them to connect with people to the real life examples or real examples or real issues which they are facing in their projects or which they have faced in their projects. So that helps our students to get a real feel of what is happening in the industry. Yeah, that's all. So this is our motto: learn anything from anywhere. So let's move into the big data world. So I hope you remember the days around 1970s, 1960s, 1980s when there was a computer operator who was sitting in front of the PC, entering some data on his desktop. And at that time, desktop was also pretty big. You can't even run a computer without ACs and things like that. So and the data which was generated or data which was generated by these operators were very less, and we were really easily able to maintain them. I hope you also remember the days when we used to have a floppy disk of 3 MB, and then that was increased to I think 5 MB or something, and we were pretty happy that, oh wow, we can store 2 more MB, and that was pretty sufficient for us to carry the data. But days are gone. We have hard disk or external hard disk of 1 terabyte, and those are not sufficient for me. So the rate at which data which is generated by users, basically there was a tremendous increase in data generation from users who are using the system and that this is only the one thing which is generating data. So there are things like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn coming in where users started entering their data which is going into the systems, and there was an enormous amount of increase in the rate at which data was generated. And to process this data, to look into this data, our traditional systems are not capable of these things. Then it's not only the user generated data, the next bigger problem is machine generated data. Can anyone think of why I've placed this picture over here? The previous picture was pretty obvious, and I did not ask why I placed this picture, but why I placed this picture. Any guesses? Akash says weather forecasting. Yes, Akash, weather forecasting. But why I faced this is I'm talking about the machine generated data, and Girish says cloud data. Girish, no, I'm not coming to the cloud part right now. Will be looking into the cloud. So, but this is not related to cloud. This is weather only. So. So basically, the satellites which are sending the data for weather forecast are sending enormous amount of data each minute. And when I have to do weather forecast, what would be the weather in London at 2 p.m. I have to process not only today's data which is sent by satellites. I might have to process last 10 years of the data to predict what would be the temperature at 2 p.m. today. So there's an enormous amount of machine generated data which we have to process to find out or do to basically research into the data. Abhijat says data around a year. Yeah, might be data around a year also. Any ideas why I have placed this picture over here? Okay, no answers. Okay, so basically, this is again one more example of machine generated data. A normal Boeing flight with say 30 minutes flight. If 30 minutes flight, Boeing 357 would generate 10 GB of data per engine. A normal flight I think has 4 engines, so a 30 minutes flight would generate 40 GB of data in just 30 minutes. And say if we find a black box of recently lost Malaysian airline flights or AirAsia flights, and if we get their black boxes, just to find out what would have happened to them, we have to process terabytes of data. And if I put that terabyte of data in Oracle Word, it will take me days to just understand the data. Then there's an enormous amount of data on which the medical industry is setting up with or generating from their machines, their user histories, their user treatments and things like that. And that data is used not only to do research in medical field, but to do analytics on the data and predict your future diseases, suggest you medicines and things like that. So I hope you can understand why I placed this picture over here. Transactional data, Abhijat said transactional data. Yes, Abhijat, that is transactional data. Rohit said consumer habits. Yeah, yes, definitely we can relate with that. So if I talk about say Walmart is handling more than 1 million transactions per hour. They have 9,000 stores worldwide. Each store has 10,000 to 100,000 SKUs. By SKU, I mean to say number of products available in their systems or available in their stores. So let me give you a pretty interesting example before I go ahead. When I used to buy a vegetable from one of the vegetable vendors who used to pass nearby my house, and I used to buy vegetables with him daily, but some certain day he stopped passing. I also did not remember I used to buy it from a nearby another vegetable vendor. I recently shifted to New Society around 4 or 5 months back, and when I went down to buy the vegetable, I found the same vegetable vendor sitting nearby. I asked him, hey man, you used to visit that area, why you are not visiting that area and you moved on to this area? He gave me a pretty smart answer. He said, sir, in this area people used to have bigger cars, Mercs and Audis. They have high spending power. Houses in this area are big. So people do not bargain much with me. People are buying more vegetables as compared to that area. People are even ready to buy costlier vegetables. So that guy was intelligent. He was able to predict the market. He was able to do analytics over the market. But as his area or market area was very less as compared to Walmart, his number of SKUs was very less. So he was able to do analytics. He was able to predict his market area where he can increase the sales, and he changed his market area. But if Walmart has to do same thing on 1 million transactions every hour on their 9,000 stores, think of what kind of data processing they have to do. And so basically the data which is lying in the traditional data warehouse systems has enormous amount of power, and they can mint a lot of amount of money on that, but they are not able to process the data in their traditional databases, and that's the reason they are moving on the data to the Hadoop and related world to do the processing on this enormous amount of data. Sounds good till now? Okay, let's assume that's sounding good to everyone. So let's talk about 3 V's of big data. What are 3 big V's of big data? First is called volume of the data. Second is velocity of the data. Third is variety of the data. Let's see what is volume of the data. So if you look, Girish says, yeah. So let's look into what is the volume of the data on which we are setting up with, or companies are setting up with. If we look at, so these figures might be little older, might not be the exact figures, but I'm just trying to give you a glimpse of how much data we are setting up with and what is there in this data. The whole World Wide Web is more than 3 zettabytes of data. Congress, the Library of Congress is setting up with more than 300 terabytes of data in their library. Facebook is setting up with more than 30 petabytes of data. This figure is very old. They're now setting up with, I think, zettabytes or something like that. Walmart, I'm just talking about their data warehouse. I'm not talking about their real transactional database system. Just their data warehouse, they are setting up with 2.5 petabytes of data in their data warehouse. eBay is setting up with 10 plus petabytes of data in their data warehouse. So this is the kind of data people are setting up with, and if I have to run some query on a table which is having 10 GBs of data or 1 petabyte of data in Oracle Word or MySQL Word, I am definitely sure you know this is what happens. So the next problem in this area is not the volume of the data, it's the velocity at which this data is growing. So YouTube has new videos of 48 hours each minute uploaded to its website. So if YouTube have to process these videos and figure out whether the content of this video is as per the guidelines or terms and conditions of YouTube, they have to process 48 hours of videos in less than a minute. Okay, so you can think of the kind of processing which is required at the backend to process all these videos. Every minute there are 571 new websites launched in this world. Facebook is generating more than 500 terabytes of data each day. Twitter is generating more than 175 million tweets each day, and they process these tweets to find out the hottest topics on top left hand side corner. So at the back end, it's all the processing which is happening on the big data systems. Walmart is generating 1 plus million transactions each hour. This is not only the problem, the velocity of data at which this data is growing. The next major problem is the acceleration of this velocity. That is the rate at which this velocity itself is growing. If I compare the change in the rate at which that data is growing to 2009 to 2020, that would be 44 times. The data production will be 44 times greater in 2020 than it was in 2009. So it's not only this velocity, it's the acceleration of this velocity which is again a major challenge in this world. Then the third major challenge is the variety of the data. So it's in our databases or things like that, we store structured data, and that is pretty easy to process. But the user-generated data, machine-generated data might be semi-structured or totally unstructured, and They have to process that data too. So, so another complexity is the kind of data, which is the variety. That is a variety of data. It could be semi-structured, it could be unstructured, and we have to process that. So, so the processing of this data is complex and require more, is basically more CPU intensive. And here we require high processing power to process this kind of data. Anything till now before I move on to next slide? Okay, assume yes from everyone. Okay, so I think Girish also, not Girish, I think Akash asked me how, or Akash, or I think probably Akash asked me how companies are using big data, how companies are working on this. So this slide is dedicated to that. These are few of the major areas of places where companies are using big data and trying to mint on the data on which they are sitting up with. So for example, predict exactly what customer wants before they ask for it. You log into LinkedIn, on the right hand side, LinkedIn will suggest friends for you. So they predict what you are looking for before you have even searched for a friend. Search for any product on the marketing campaign. Search for any product on the on Amazon website. Go to any other temp website in the world. Somewhere on the left or right or bottom of that website, you will see an advertisement popping up for the same product. At the back end, there is an enormous amount of data processing which happens to predict what you are looking for, analyzing your history, analyzing your click stream patterns and things like that, to predict or to do these marketing campaigns. Then it's not only the case, companies are doing personalized campaigns. For example, Luxottica, one of the premium brands, they are trying to understand their user data, their customer behavior, their past behavior, their geological, their demographics and things like that. And based on that, they are doing personalized campaigns for their customers. So companies are trying to process the data which they have as much as possible and trying to predict or trying to understand how they can increase their sales, how they can increase their customer lifespan, how they can make the customers loyal to them. Fraud detection, pretty interesting thing and highly used. So I'll just give you an example of what is happening in this in the banking industry. The data which is generated in the banking industry is pretty huge. I give you an example. I think around 4 or 5 years down the line, I was working on the data for one of the renowned banks in Singapore. I will not name the bank. I was doing the sum of the transactions for a week in that bank. And one of the guy from the testing team also did the sum of the transactions for 1 week from the same bank, and we found $500,000 difference, $500,000 Singapore dollars difference in our sum. After a discussion or after a fight of 30 minutes, I figured out that I was doing rounding up to 4 decimal places up, and he was doing rounding up to 2 decimal places, and just by difference of 2 decimal places to 4 decimal places, there was a difference of $500,000 transactions. So this is the kind of data which is generated in banking industry, and when they have to do processing on this data, when they have to detect frauds on that data, you can think of what kind of CPU intensive and memory intensive those processes would be. So there are things like anti-money laundering mentors, if you have heard for, and there are a lot of other anti-money laundering tools which require high enormous amount of data to look into and generate SAR reports. So each month, each quarter, banks have to generate these SAR reports and submit to the respective governments. Otherwise, they are fined heavily. Citibank has been fined heavily twice, I think, in the history, because they were not able to predict some of the frauds in their system. So banks have to detect the frauds, and by fraud I mean to say they have to predict the some fishy natures in your transactions, in your history, not only in your transactions, in how you are dealing with equities, how you are dealing with derivatives and things like that also. So say for each month a salary of $8,000 is credited to my account, but one sudden day 1 million is credited to my account. They are there in my account for 24 hours and after that they just gone away. So bank will see something fishy over here and will generate an alert. So these kind of alerts are then sent to the government as reports, and these are used to predict frauds in the system. Getting customer excited about their own data. So let me give you another example. There are companies like MyFitnessPal. What they do is they sell consumable products, and based on what you buy from them, they predict what is your calorie intake from those products and display those figures to you on their website or on their apps. So just by processing the data which they have and showing them to the customer, they are exciting the data to the customer. So when customer sees he has consumed so and so calories, and they also give him suggestions like you have consumed more calories or you're consuming less proteins and things like that. So they are basically trying to excite the customer about their own data, and this way customer is becoming loyal to them, because next time customer thinks, oh, I can buy directly from them and that will give me the diet it takes and things like that. Is it making sense till now, or I'm just speaking to? Guys, you can just ping me yes or no. Is it making sense till now, or I'm just speaking? Rohit says yes. Kamaljeet says yes. Okay, there was hold on. Avijat says indeed it is. Okay, cool, sure. Identifying the customer pain points and solve them. These also says yes from my side too. Okay, cool. That's great. So identifying the customer pain points and solve them. Let me give you another interesting example. I hope everyone of you would have traveled international, and you would have had a hopping flight. So the major challenge in hopping flight is your baggage getting lost, and this is very common problem. So although airlines can't change their systems in a day, they can't reduce the human errors, they can't change everything. But what Delta Airline did is they created an app called Track My Bag app. You just snap the sticker which they put on your luggage, snap it and upload it to the Track My Bag app of Delta Airlines, and this app will then track where your bag is lying. So although you might have caught a flight from Singapore to New Jersey, halting at London, and by mistake your baggage has been unloaded at London. But if you are able to track your bag, that your bag is at London and would be arriving to you at so and so time after so and so hours, you will not be calling customer care executives and shouting to them, and you will not be a little bit frustrated about your bag delays and things like that. Although you would be, but that will at least give you give you some sort of satisfaction that yeah, my bag is lying at so and so station, and I'll be getting my bag at so and so time. So companies are trying to use the data which they have as much as possible, and trying to use that data to resolve customer pains and solve them. And then highly used in healthcare and improvement tasks. So by understanding the patient conditions, their lifestyle, their work and home environment, health providers are using. So nowadays in US, definitely insurance companies are looking not only into your work and home environment, not only to your lifestyles, not only to your historical diseases, they are also looking into your driving styles, how rash you are driving, which area you are driving daily, to predict or to give you insurance quotes. These insurance companies are highly using this data of yours to find out what would be the insurance quote which will be given to you. The car insurance companies are using are getting the data from car vendors to figure out where you are driving, which area you are driving, what is kind of driving you are doing, a rush driving or not, whether you are driving in crowded areas or not, and based on that they are giving you insurance quotes. So social graph analysis highly used in this industry. Big data is highly used, and I think most of the big data related technologies have been evolved because of this industry. So by social graph, I meant to say that the things like Facebook or Twitter or things like that, and how people are commenting on these industries for you. So I just give you an example. I brought a product from one of the biggest e-vendors in India, Flipkart. Somehow that product was faulty. I tried to call their customer care, but they say, sir, we can't help it, and they gave me some excuses. All I did is I placed a comment on their Facebook page stating XYZ. I will not read that comment. So within 15 to 20 minutes, I think, I got a call from Facebook, Flipkart. Sir, please remove that comment from our Facebook page. We'll replace your product in next 24 hours. So at the back end, they are looking into the Facebook comments which are being posted onto Facebook. They are filtering out the comments relevant to them. They are then filtering those comments which are negative. They are processing those comments. Based on the processing of those comments, they are figuring out the customers who have placed those comments. They are based on the customer. They are able to figure out what was the order ID last for this customer, where the customer is facing problem. They figured out my phone number and they called me. So this is how people are intensively using big data and related technologies to process the data, looking at their social graph, sentiment analysis about their companies, about how the company reputation is there in the market. No one wants a single bad comment about themselves on any of the social media. A single bad comment about a company on a social media reduces their customer number extensively. Even a single comment. Research and development, it's not only the companies who are investing highly in the big data and related technologies, it's the government also which have started investing a lot, like Obama administration in around March 2012 announced big budgets, more than $200 billion for big data and related technologies in their departments like Department of Defense, National Institute of Health, Department of Energy, US Geological Survey. So it's not only the companies who are spending a lot in this area, it's the government organizations are also using big data and related technologies to do different things, to maintain traffic, to maintain law and order and things like that. Even traffic lights are also automated with the help of high data processing at the back end. Yeah, if they figure out that between 12 to 1 in the night no one travels from this road, they can switch off the lights. The people are trying pretty interesting thing with the help of high data processing power which they have now, and the data which is sitting in their historical databases. All cool till now? Okay. I just assume everything's fine with everyone. So we have already talked about Facebook setting up with this and doing, and that is used for analyzing a factor. I forgot Kamalji your question, but that was related to this slide. I definitely can. Okay, yeah, that was how the name node works when the data is distributed. Yeah. So this slide, I'll try to explain you that that thing what you were asking. So say this is my file. Which could be divided into so which is of total size of 64 into 5 MB, 64 into 5 MB. So in the Hadoop word, HDFS word, the default block size is 64 MB. That's the reason I have mentioned it over 64. In Hadoop Yarn, I think it's 128 MB default. The block size is much higher compared to your other file systems like Unix or Windows, where it's 512 bits or something like that. The block size is very high. And after explaining this slide, I'll ask you the question why that block size is high. Probably someone of you could guess why that is high. In the meantime, so block size in the Hadoop word is very high, and your data is divided into blocks. So if my file is of size say 64 into 5 MB, that would be divided into 5 blocks, and these blocks would be placed in my cluster. and say this is how my cluster is looking like. This my cluster is looking like. In this example, I'm just assuming that my cluster is only has one data center. There could be other data centers also, but in this example, I'm just assuming that my cluster has only one data center, and my data center has 3 racks, and this is how racks are looking like, and each rack is having 4 data nodes, or what I called commodity hardware till now. So, so this is how my cluster is looking like, and I have to put or copy this file inside my cluster. So what will happen? So this block 1, I'll try to put this block 1, and as the data is replicated and the default replication factor in the cluster is 3, so each block would be copied thrice in my cluster. And how that is done? The first copy of the block would be made randomly somewhere in the cluster, probably locally. I'll just come to that part, what is locally. And that say is placed on disk 1. Then the second and third copy of the same block would be placed across somewhere in the cluster. And that is placed at disk 6 and disk 7. Does anyone want to answer a question why it has been placed on disk 6 and 7 and not on disk 2, 3 or 4? Kamalji says failover. Yes, that's perfectly correct answer. And the probability of whole rack going down in the cluster is very high as compared to 2 different racks going down simultaneously. And this is the way I replicate my data across the cluster. Each block is replicated thrice in my cluster. This replication factor is a configurable thing. I can change it to 5, I can change it to 10, I can even change it to 1, but that does not make sense in the Hadoop cluster. Because if the replication factor is 1, I'm not using the processing power of Hadoop, and I'm not making the system reliable. But in development clusters, you can make that 1 to reduce your storage cost and to reduce the cluster cost. Why not put on 3 copies in 3 rack? Yeah, Rohit, I was coming to that question. Anyone want to guess why it's not placed in rack 3? So the 1 copy over here, 1 copy over here, 1 copy over here, somewhere in this rack, and 1 copy in somewhere in this rack. Okay, let me explain. So Rohit, I'll be explaining this question very much in detail when I'll be talking about the right anatomy of the system, but I'll try to explain it over here also. And we'll be talking about this thing in detail in the right anatomy of the system. So what happens up is, as there was more metadata in this case, they are placed in. Abhijat says more metadata. No, Abhijat, metadata would remain same because somehow name node has to know this block is lying over here or here. The metadata information would just change the name, the disk name, and the quantity of the metadata would remain same. So Kamaljeet says IO time. Kamaljeet, can you please explain or throw more light on this point? So Kamaljeet, IO time. I think Kamaljeet, you are perfectly right. I'll just put you on air. I want you to explain to everyone. I think you are perfectly right what you are saying. Sorry, I muted you. I'm unmuting you.
As per my expectation, it is like writing within disk 6, 7 is within the rack 2, which would take lesser IO time rather than writing 1 copy in disk 6 and second copy in one of the disk of rack 3.
Yes, perfectly right. Yeah, that's a fair answer. So yeah, So IO or network, sorry, not IO, the network cost which is involved in transferring this data from here to here is pretty high, as the data transfer across rack is slower as compared to data transfer inside the rack. And if the data is transferred from here to here, it's much faster as compared to data transfer from here to this rack. And that is the reason the third copy is placed on the same rack to save this network time and save the network bandwidth usage. However, the copies are placed on two racks under the assumption that whole rack is going down in the clusters, and the probability of that thing is pretty high as compared to two racks simultaneously going down in a cluster. Although two racks can go down in the cluster, but the probability of that thing is less, and this is the assumption that two racks will not go down simultaneously. If they have gone down, yeah, that's a disaster recovery kind of scenario. Moreover, if there would have been more than one data centers, Rohit says why 2, 3 copies. Okay, Rohit, I'm just coming to that part. Moreover, if there would have been more than one data center, then these 2 copies would have gone to some other data center also to maintain the reliability of system across the data centers. So Rohit says why 3 copies? Why not 2 copies were enough? So Rohit. Okay. Just a minute. I'll explain your question in this slide. This slide talks about the architecture of the system, how your job is being processed in the system, and that will make you clear what makes the 3 copies in the system more fast as compared to 2 copies, and the number of copies more the number of copies in the system, more reliable and more powerful my system is. In these slides, I'll explain you that part. So once I'll be talking about how this whole system works, uses these copies to process the data, that will explain you. So Rohit had an answer that why in that case why I'm not putting the 2 copies only, and why I'm keeping the 3 copies. The default replication factor is 3. That could be reduced and decreased definitely, but at least 3 maintains not only the reliability but increases the processing power of the system. How? Just wait for some more time. I'll explain you that part when you understand this how this logic of processing the data happens in the cluster. So Kamalji said one of my previous question is the data to be stored by reasons like Google stores data across the world. How big data architecture works in such a situation. So this is what happens, Kamalji, in that scenario. The one copy of your data would be lying in one data center, the other copies would be lying in other data centers, and Namenode knows where your data is lying, and when you request the data, Namenode will try to find out local data for you. That is, if you are sitting in data center X and there's a copy lying in the data center, it will return you the address of that node in that data center, and you can copy or get the data locally rather than doing a network communication across the data centers. And if you are sitting the same rack where the data is lying, it will definitely return you the same address of that rack. And if you are sitting on the same data node, it will definitely return you the local node where the data is lying. So this is how the data which is replicated across data centers is being communicated or used across the cluster to get the information about the data and reduces the network bandwidth used across the cluster. Now, does that answer your question, or still you have some other confusion? Kamalji says yes. Okay, that's great. So guys, I understand you would be having questions. Keep on asking me questions. If those questions would be cleared in next slides, I'll just say you. I'll be clearing it to next slide. And if by mistake I forget when I'm coming to that slide, just ping me that question again so that I can recall that. So Rohit, just bear with me for some more time, and I'll answer your question also. Why 3 copies and why not 2 copies were enough? Although even a single copy would have been enough, but that would not have given me the reliability and the processing power as compared to 3 copies. How? Just wait for some more time. And or for the next class, because looking at the time, we might not be able to cover that whole thing in this class. But definitely, I'll answer your question. Just recall me when I'm on those slide number 37, 38, 39. I'll answer your question. So guys, so now let's say I have to put another block. So the first copy of that block would go somewhere, say it's gone to rack 2, disk 6. Now I want a quick answer from everyone where the second and third copy of block 2 would go. Kamalji says rack 1 or 3. Akash also says either rack 1 or 3. Yes, that's a perfectly correct answer. It might go to any one of the rack, but it will not go to both rack 1 and rack 3. That's the correct answer. And the reason behind that is to save your network cost. And same will happen to other blocks also. So same will happen to other blocks also, and it will keep on copying this whole file to the system. So a file is divided into blocks, and these blocks are copied, and these blocks are really replicated. It's not your whole file which is replicated. These blocks of the file which are replicated, and this metadata information is maintained on the name node. So what I was saying in this slide was, where is it gone? So files are broken up into blocks, typically of 64 MB. Each block is replicated on multiple data nodes. I hope now this point is clear to you. And this all we have talked about. Single namespace for the entire cluster, data coherency, write once, read many times, intelligent client. Client can find out the location of the blocks, and so in that case, client just communicate with the name node, and name node returns the location of the block, and client directly communicate to that data node and get the location of that block. Is that clear? Other than the Rohit, your question, I'll talk about that. Any other questions? Okay. So I assume everything is fine. I'll just go ahead. So we have just seen this block placement strategy. One replica on the local node. By local node, what I mean to say is, say I as a client, Akash, okay, Akash says why 64 MB. Okay, so as Hadoop is dealing with large files, and as I was saying previously also, the seek time to find the data is very high. So to reduce this seek time, they chose to keep block sizes high. So to seeking, so as I'm traversing high block sizes, my seek time is reduced rather than looking into individual smaller block sizes. So this high block sizes reduces in the seek time of the system, and I just read this whole block and process the data. So this high block sizes basically helps me in reducing the seek time of my system. A small block size is also, yeah, that is also one of the reasons. A small block sizes will result in high amount of metadata also, but large block sizes also help me in reducing the seek time of the system. So we have seen one replica on local node, second replica on a remote rack. By local node, I mean I was saying that say I as a client running on this, sitting on this machine. This machine has this Hadoop infrastructure installed, and this is one of the commodity hardware of this whole cluster. I as a client sitting on this on this machine, communicating with the help of my Unix system and communicating with the system. So when I will be requesting the name node, hey man, I have to copy this file somewhere, do let me know where I can copy. So that name node will intelligently find that this data node has some capacity, and if this data node has some capacity, the first place where the address which name node will return to copy this block would be the local node. And this is how a name node tries to reduce, or the cluster or the infrastructure on the whole framework tries to reduce on network bandwidth as well as possible. So that is what I was saying over here. The local node, one replica on the local node, second replica on the remote rack, and third replica on the same remote rack, and additional replicas randomly placed. And clients, when and same applies to read also. When client says I want to read something, the name node intelligently finds the nearest replica for you and tries to return that replica. Okay. So now all of these things I've covered in much detail in my previous slides, and I hope that is all clear. Large main property of LTFS file system: large block sizes, the file sizes are large, the application factor, failure is normal, normal scenario, fault tolerance, and if something goes down, the automatic recovery happens at the back end. How that happens? So say my data node, which is having a copy. Oh, 1 minute. Let me share an Excel sheet. Just give me a sec. Rohit says, and if the data node comes back, it will adjust. Yes, definitely it will adjust. So now you understand all this thing. There's something called name node. There's something called data nodes. This all are data nodes. And the client, when I start to read something, it will just request for the metadata about the data from the name node and read it from the corresponding data node. These blocks are these green things are the blocks, and these yellow things are your data nodes, and these are your racks. And the data is replicated in the blocks across the data nodes, and the name node at the backend keeps on communicating with these data nodes to maintain the system. Do I have any chat? Yeah, okay, that was from Rohit. Now these all things are just cleared in my previous slides. So name node maintains the metadata in memory. That is the list of the files. So now you understand how the name node gets the list of the files. Whenever I have to copy any file, first I have to communicate with the name node to get the location where this file need to be copied. So this is how name node knows which are the files existing in my system. List of the blocks, again the same logic. I have to ask all these information from the name node where to put these blocks, and this is how name nodes knows the list of blocks existing in my system. It cost me not more than 500 USD or 600 USD. But I have to buy a single laptop of 15 or 20 processors, 20 CPUs with say 27 or 30 GB RAM. That will not cost me $1,500. That will cost me much more than that. And that's the reason the vertical scaling is not only complex, that is costly also. And that's the reason that systems are said to be economical rather than buying a system which has such a kind of processing power. I buy 3 commodity hardwares which are cheaper for me and put them in my cluster, and that's the reason the system is economical. Efficient: by distributing the data and doing a parallel processing, the system is very efficient. Why the system is reliable? It maintains multiple copies of your data. People from data warehouse background, please try to digest this thing. It tries to maintain multiple copies of your data automatically into the cluster. So when you copy a file into LTFS Word, at least 3 copies of that file would be available in different data nodes across the cluster. Why, how, I'll talk about that things. But this is how the system is made reliable. So when one node is down, the copy of that file is available in some other node, and that is what makes the system reliable. I'll be talking about this in more detail in my next slides, but these are few things what makes Hadoop really useful. Any questions on how the system is scalable, economical, efficient, and reliable? Abhijat says, could you please explain? Okay, Rohit, I know it's redundant. Okay, so before coming to Rohit, Avijat has asked me a question. Okay, before that, Kamaljeet also said. Okay, so Kamaljeet and Rohit, you had same questions, 3 copies, and Rohit also says, isn't that redundant? I'll be coming to you in a minute. Avijat says, could you please explain the economical section again? So by economical, Avijat, I'm trying to say to buy systems which are vertically costly. So in this example, what I was saying is you have to buy 3 laptops of i5 kind of thing, 4 or 5 processors with 8 GB RAM, and that cost me around 500 USD each. So in total, that cost me 1500 USD if I have to say buy such 3 laptops. But if you have to buy a single laptop with 20 CPUs kind of thing, approximately 5 into 15 CPUs kind of thing, and 8 into 3 GB RAM, 8 into 3 GB RAM, bear with my writing, sorry for this pathetic writing. So if I have to buy such a laptop, that won't be possible for me to buy in 1500 USD, that is 500 into 3 USD. That will be much higher than this. So that's the reason the system is called economical. I can buy cheaper hardwares and add that to system, and I can make an economical system rather than expensive vertically scaled servers of IBM or you know the vertically high huge processing power servers. Avijat, does that answer your question? Yes, cost would go, but the rate at which that cost would increase in scaling it horizontally would be much lesser as compared to horizontal scaling. Yes, Avijat, performance is linked with the aspects of the machine, so that's the reason I'm okay. Just a minute. Give me a sec. And don't want to hold the class. Okay, let me explain. I want to clear it out. Just give me a sec. Okay, okay, I hope that answers Avijat. Then Rohit has a question. Where's it gone? Rohit, you asked some question. I think I missed your question. Could you please repeat that? You were asking something related to redundancy. I'm not sure. I'll just unmute. Okay, Rohit has sent that thing to private to me. So Rohit says 3 copies will cause redundancy. Grish, yes, I will be taking 10 minutes break after I complete the slide. I also prefer 10 minutes break because I'm also speaking from long. So we will take a quick 10 minutes break after I just answer this Rohit's question. So Rohit, yes, the data is redundant, but we get a lot of other benefits with this redundancy, and that's the reason I told you prior speaking to that. Please try to digest this concept. The redundancy is not a bad thing in the system. The days are gone when hard disks used to be pretty high. The cost of storing the data was very high. We are looking into the era when Akash, I'll just come to you. We are working in the era where storing of the data is not a costly task, and replicating the data helps in many aspects, including the reliability of the system. If something has gone down, I'll give you an example also after the break how that helps in more, and furthermore slides will also explain you why the redundancy is not a bad thing. So it would take for you a little time to digest this thing, but yes, redundancy is not a bad thing. Though the days are gone when people used to say don't make your data redundant, do as much normalization in your data warehouse design as much as possible. Days are gone. People try to keep data as much as unnormalized as they can, rather than using 3N kind of format. People are not even using single N's also these days and the reason behind that is the storing power of the system is pretty high, and the processing power we can use of the system to process the data. Does that answer your question partly? I hope not fully, but partly. Okay, Rohit says yes. Okay, so guys, let's take a 10 minutes break. It's 8:30 IST in my watch. I'll be back at 8:40 IST, and same you can take care of your watches in your respective time zones. Sure. Okay, everyone says okay. Sure. So I'll also mute my mic and let's meet in 10 minutes. Okay, what is big data? Sure. So any data which is pretty big for your traditional systems to handle, not only big in terms of volume of the data, but the complexity of the data, the type of data structure and structure, as well as the rate at which data is growing. So the enormous amount of data is said to be big data. So any big data, the term itself is big data. So any data which is very big, not only in terms of size but also about the complexity. So that data requires high processing power to process, to look into the data, and that data is said to be big data, and we use Hadoop, a framework, to process that data. And could it be data in Oracle DB? Yes, definitely, Akash. That could be a data in uh, is that just a concept? Yeah, Abhijat, that's just a term which says data is big. The data which is big for traditional systems to handle. The data is called a big data, and there is no predefined size limit that if the data is more than 1 MB, that is said to be big data. Or the data is more than 5 petabytes, that is said to be big data. Any data can be big based on your requirement, based on your complexity of the data, based on your processing involved with the data. So any data which is pretty big for traditional systems to handle is said to be I won't say it's which is complex for traditional system, but any data which is pretty big and need to be processed is said to be big data. There's no predefined definition of big data, or not predefined data limit which is said to be big data. Akash, could that be a data in Oracle DB? Definitely, that could be a data in Oracle DB also. Tech data present in stock exchange. Yeah, definitely the data which is Abhijat says the data which is generated out of a stock exchange, either out of tech or either out of trades or orders. Yeah, definitely that is a big data, because the data which is generated out of stock exchange is pretty high and pretty huge, and that really requires high complexity to process the data. So Abhijat said, okay, understood. It's just roughly 1 TB of data per day from, it's roughly 1 TB of data per day from NYSE. Yeah, probably that could be 1 TB of data. I'm not sure about the figures, but definitely that could be 1 TB of data per day out of NYSE. Can RDBMS also be hosted on multiple nodes? Rohit, yeah, but such kind of parallel processing, such kind of framework is not available in traditional RDBMS systems. And I'll be talking about the architecture about this system, and that will give you a more deeper insight why that is. First thing is your data is not reliable in those systems. Those systems are not scalable. So this system, although they are scalable, I won't say they are not scalable. They could be scalable, but they are not economical as Hadoop cluster is, because you can just add the commodity hardware. Those are not so much efficient as the Hadoop system is. Those are definitely not reliable if your database is down. Let me give you an example. Me and some of my friends planned for a party over Friday night. Our data was in one of the data centers. As our data was distributed across data centers and we were maintaining multiple copies of data center, the data center gone down, and the friends with whom I was planning a party was cancelled, because those friends also had the data in the same data center, and they have to spend whole weekend in the office to resolve the data center related issues. But as our data was lying in different nodes, was available across the cluster, that was transparent to the clients, and they were able to get their data, and that did not affected anyone in the Hadoop world. But as they were storing a single copy in their data center and their data was not distributed across the cluster, they did not have their distributed copies of the data. They have to resolve those issues, getting the data center up and things like that over the whole weekend. And that is make the system reliable. Yeah, definitely RDBMs can do a parallel processing, but they do not have such kind of framework or architecture. What I'll be talking about in next few of my slides. So Rohit, does that answer your question? Okay, Rohit says yes. Okay, any other questions? So, okay. So these are the assumptions on which Hadoop works. I'll be coming to this slide. Okay, okay. Whenever I come to this slide, I recall one thing. So guys, actually, many times we face issues. Might be joining the GoToMeeting or the link. There's issues with the link with some particular person or things like that. And at that time, we don't have any communication medium because we are across geographies, we are across time zones. So I just request every one of you to add me on the Skype so that if you are facing some issues while joining into the meeting and things like that, now we have some communication medium and we can communicate over the Skype what is the issue we are facing, and that helps us to keep in touch. So I'm just pinging the Skype ID on the chat window. Please add me on the Skype so that we can get in touch if we are facing issues with the meeting someday. Oh, sorry. So this is the correct one. Please ignore the previous one. This is the correct one. Please add me to on Skype, and I'll create a group for this batch, so that if we are facing any issues while joining in or in between the session also, at least we can ping on the Skype, and we are aware of that you are somewhere and facing some issues. So that will help each of us. So you can send me a Skype invite. I've got Akash invite. Thank you, Akash, for sending me the invite. And if you are facing any issues, just come on Skype, and I'll be definitely be there on the Skype at the timing of the class, so that if you're facing any issues with the meeting or something, we can talk it over there. I also get an invite from Karish. Thanks for that. Okay, so as I was giving example in the previous slide, so these are the assumptions, or there's the thought process behind creating this architecture. So these are the assumptions which Hadoop assumes, and based on this, the whole framework is designed. So Hadoop says or assumes that hardware will always fail. You cannot stop hardware from failing. No one can stop hardware from failing. No. So hardware will always fail. Applications need a write once, read many times kind of access. So the data which is generated, either a user generated data, machine generated data, or whatsoever the kind of data, the enormous amount of data which is generated is written once into the systems. However, that would be read many times to do different analysis, to do different things on the data. And this is the second most assumption on which Hadoop works. Third thing is IO is always a bottleneck.